Hi guys, so I'm doing something a little bit different in today's video, in that I'm not going to be coding. Instead, what I wanted to do is I wanted to touch on this trend in influencers videos on YouTube or influencers on Instagram that tend to hype the crap out of e-commerce platforms and Shopify, and they sort of portray them to be this get-rich-quick scheme. So I've been coding Shopify sites and running Shopify sites for a little bit over a year now. And so if you're thinking about starting a e-commerce site or a Shopify site, this video is for you. And I just want to give you like my 5 pieces of advice that I would give to someone who was first starting out, that was in my position, about a year ago. So the first piece of advice I would give to someone who's thinking about starting an e-commerce site is to sort of manage their expectations in that and recognize that e-commerce as a discipline is saturated. So all the time, like when you're first getting into e-commerce, like one of the big questions that you have to answer is like, what is my niche, right? Like what niche should I do? And and people will say, oh, I don't want to get into a saturated niche, but e-commerce as a discipline itself is saturated. If you take a brief look at the history of e-commerce, right? Shopify went live in 2006, and Shopify basically allowed entrepreneurs with zero tech experience to build their brands. And by doing this, basically, it increased the level of competition in e-commerce hugely, right? It used to be that only entrepreneurs that could code or entrepreneurs who would hire someone to code their site, right, could enter into this .com bubble, right? Afterwards, right, after Shopify came out, anyone could enter, right? And because there was so much less competition back in the day, it used to be like when Shopify first launched and it wasn't that popular, right? It used to be you could run like a halfway decent Facebook ad to a halfway decent landing page and it would convert pretty well. Things have changed a lot since then. When you're running a Facebook ad, right, Facebook is putting you in competition with basically every other person in your niche, right? And they're trying to see what the best ad is to display to the user to get the user to buy the product or get the ad to be successful, because they want your ad to be successful, right? They want to keep around the successful ads because those people will continue to pay. So when it comes to what niche you should pick, my advice, and this is the second piece of advice, right, is basically every niche is saturated to a certain extent. So pick what you're passionate about. Coding Shopify sites or working on Shopify sites, developing a Shopify site, it's a lot of work, and it is going to be 100 times easier to keep up with the work and keep building your business and stay motivated, right, to build your business if you're passionate about what you're building. It's going to be easier to work on. It's also, you're going to understand your customers much more if you're passionate about the niche. Let's say you really like cycling, right? And your customers, you're selling like bike tires or something like that, right? I personally know nothing about bike tires, right? But you, as someone who understands that niche, right, and is passionate about that niche, you're going to know all the different ways that your customer what your customer is looking for when they buy a bike tire. And then the other thing, and this sort of leads into the third point, the third piece of advice is you need to understand what your unique value proposition to your customer is. And so when we talk about unique value proposition, basically what I'm talking about when I say that is, why should I as a customer choose your brand over other brands out there, right? What does your brand specifically bring to the table, right? And this next point, like I want to emphasize this, like this should be bolded, underlined, all caps, right? You cannot, as like a new business owner that's like starting either like a drop shipping Shopify site or just first starting out, you cannot compete on price in the e-commerce space. You're competing against Amazon, you're competing against huge brands like Walmart, right? Like there is no way that you're going to be able to beat out the massive companies, right, on price, because they have all of this infrastructure built up as far as how they ship things, how they store things, how they produce things, right? And when you're first starting out, like you don't have all that infrastructure set up. Maybe someday you will, right? And then maybe price can be something you can compete on. But in the meantime, you cannot compete on price. You have to compel your customers to buy from you irrespective of the price that you're setting. Now, obviously, you can get way too high and whatnot, and you don't want to do that. But generally, you don't want price to be something that is one of the first variables that enters into your customers' minds. You know, an example of this, like if I use one of my own e-commerce sites for this. So on one of my e-commerce sites, I sell coffee, right? And the bend on it is basically I sell it to people that are interested in philosophy. And the coffee itself has, you know, pictures of philosophers on it. It's titles of different philosophies and whatnot. And in addition, 20% of the profits of the site go to philosophy nonprofits that encourage philosophy education in K through 12 students, or teaching philosophy education to K through 12 students, or just teaching philosophy education to anyone who's interested in it. And so by donating that 20%, first of all, if we think about that, like I am passionate about philosophy, right? I majored in philosophy in college. I understand the niche, right? And then on top of that, right, it gives my customers a reason to buy my coffee, right? If I just said, hey, listen, like I'm going to sell you coffee and there's no unique value proposition, it's just coffee, right? There's tons of other brands, like my brand makes good coffee, but there's tons of other brands that can probably make similar quality coffee for less price because of all the infrastructure set up, right? But when you build that unique value proposition around your brand, right, you're going to encourage your customers to be buying from you rather than Amazon or Walmart. All right, now the fourth piece of advice that I would give people is you need to understand, when you're going to start a Shopify site, you need to understand Shopify's limitations as a platform. So Shopify, as I highlighted earlier, it's great because it allows people that don't know how to code at all to build their brands and build an e-commerce site. But the issue with there's basically one big issue that I've run into with Shopify, right? And Shopify, like any other company, right, is motivated to get you to pay them. That can be a good thing because in the sense that like Shopify wants your store to be successful, right? The more successful your store is, the more likely you are to continue to pay them month after month. But the other thing that Shopify wants to do, and this is less good for your site, right, is Shopify wants to find how they can get you to pay the most per month. Now, if you're super successful and you go onto Shopify's higher tier plans, right, that's one way that they can get you to pay more, right? But another way that they can get you to pay more is every app purchase, right? So when you buy an app, right, and you're paying a monthly fee for an app that you have on your Shopify store, Shopify is collecting a portion of the revenue from that app sale, right? And so there's certain features that in e-commerce, for instance, like subscriptions, that really Shopify should have implemented, right? It would be with subscriptions less so, but there's certain features that would be fairly easy for Shopify to implement, and to my knowledge, they haven't implemented them. And that's part of what I do on this channel, actually, is showing people how to implement these really easy features that a lot of times, if you don't code in, you're going to have to use an app for, right? And sometimes those apps can be paid. But the point is basically like Shopify, in my mind, right, like an e-commerce platform should have those options, right? But Shopify wants you to pay for the apps, and so they don't implement them, and it ends up that you know you're stuck paying for these apps, this monthly recurring cost, and that can start to add up, especially when you're like a lean startup. So you just have to understand that, and understand that either learning how to code Liquid, right, in JavaScript and HTML and CSS and all that stuff, that could be really helpful to you, even if you're starting a Shopify site, or you could hire someone like me to basically code in those features, right, like features that you want, like certain apps or whatever that are these monthly recurring costs. If you're really in this for the long haul, right, it might be worthwhile for you to find a developer to actually go in and just hard code those into your site, or create an app for you that you can buy as like a one-time purchase sort of thing instead of a subscription. Because, you know, if you really are in it for the long haul and you're running your site for years, right, $2, $3 a month, $5, $10 a month, that starts to add up. So the final piece of advice that I would give someone who's first starting out their Shopify in 2021 is to understand that you have to work hard on your site and really build something of value before you can reap the benefit from it. So like what I would tell a beginner basically is you're going to spend a minimum of 6 months of like actually really working on your business, understanding all the ins and the outs of your business, and building systems that can run with you not watching them all the time, right? And so you'll understand this as you start to get started on your site. But like it's not like as I was talking about in the beginning, like this get rich quick scheme. Like it's not like that. It's like, it's like work. Like you work for 6 months and it's a lot of work for 6 months. And even past that 6 months, you're obviously working. But once you get to that 6 months, you're going to start to get some, recurring customers. You're going to start to get some subscriptions. Like things are going to start, sort of falling into place in that, probably 3 to 6 month window. Like things are going to start to fall into place or whatever, or at least that's my experience. And you're really going to understand your business and understand where it fits into the market and how you can really progress with your business. And like if you want at that point, being able to take your hands off and have this sort of more, it's never going to be 100% passive, but more passive income stream, right? And so I would just say like to get you through those 6 months, like know that there is that light at the end of the tunnel. And don't forget about like the reason that you're building what you're building, and also like as I covered earlier, like make sure that you're passionate about what you're building. Like make sure you think what you're building is good for the world, like that it should exist, and you're happy to bring it to the marketplace. And if you do all those things, you're not going to have problems like getting to that 6 month mark. So, just sort of as a conclusion, guys, like I know that, this is like a little bit maybe of like a downer on the hype around Shopify or around e-commerce, which, I think is sort of necessary in the landscape of like today's influencers or whatever. I'm not saying don't start a Shopify site. Like coding Shopify sites has been like one of my favorite things that I've done in my life. And I love that Shopify, I don't hate Shopify. Like I love that Shopify has made it possible for someone who doesn't know how to code at all to like start an e-commerce site and whatnot. And that you hear so many sort of like rags to riches stories of like people that like, like were working like 9 to 5 jobs or whatever, and then started a Shopify business on the side, and then it became this huge thing. And now their lifestyle is completely transformed. And I think that Shopify is, an amazing platform for providing that ability for people. I just think that like before you get started in Shopify, you should, you need to set your expectations in check, and people should be a little bit more realistic with like this hype surrounding Shopify or surrounding e-commerce. So that's the video, guys. If this video helped you, I'd appreciate if you leave a like and a comment. It really helps out with the algorithm. The other thing is if you want to subscribe to my channel, right now I'm doing this thing where every week I select a random subscriber and I will give them a consultation on their Shopify site. And so if that like appeals to you, you have to be subscribed to be eligible for that. So make sure to go ahead and hit that subscribe button and click the bell. And I'll see you in the next one, guys.